O.J. Simpson is dead at 76 after losing a battle to cancer, according to his family. Simpson may be one of the most controversial people in our nation's history. Before his murder trial, which divided the country and essentially turned him into an outcast, he was a celebrated football star who won the Heisman Trophy in college. He was also an actor and a pitchman, universally loved by Americans. But that life as he knew it ended on June 12, 1994, when his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman, were found stabbed to death outside of her home in Los Angeles. The shock of their murders intensifying 5 days later. For hours, time stood still as nearly 100 million Americans watched on TV at this, Simpson taking police on a low-speed chase 60 miles through Los Angeles in that white Ford Bronco.
Simpson would go on to surrender and stand trial for the murders. He was eventually acquitted in what was dubbed the trial of the century, and it aired on television daily, almost daily, for 11 months, capturing the world's attention. Here was one of those historic moments from trial.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true.
You hear the sobbing in the courtroom after that historic moment, one that was widely unexpected. Despite his acquittal, Simpson's reputation never fully recovered, both legally and in the court of opinion. He was eventually found liable for the murders in a civil trial to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, much of which he never actually paid. Legal troubles followed him for decades, especially after being sentenced to 9 to 33 years in prison for a 2007 Las Vegas hotel robbery. Simpson was released on parole in October of 2017.
Today, a post from the Simpson family on Simpson's verified X account said this: on April 10th, our father, Orenthal James Simpson, succumbed to his battle with cancer. He was surrounded by his children and grandchildren. During this time of transition, his family asked that you please respect their wishes for privacy and grace.
Let's discuss all the angles of this story with CNN's Jean Casarez, investigative journalist Diane Dimon, who was the first reporter at the murder scene in 1994, and attorney Areva Martin is also with us. Let's start with Jean Casarez. Jean, this story touches so much of American life and what was happening in the 1990s from so many angles, but perhaps one of the most enduring legacies of the Simpson trial is the way that it defined how Americans view the legal system.
No, absolutely. And there are really two O.J. Simpsons, right? I mean, there's the football icon, and there's also the one that was charged in 2 criminal cases, convicted in one, acquitted in another. But I think because there were cameras in that courtroom, you saw a legal story play out, and that trial went for months. CNN covered it wall to wall. Court TV had their cameras. It made the Court TV network at that point in the mid-90s. But you got to see witnesses. You got to see demeanor. You got to see social issues. You got to see a dream team of a defense to show that you've got to have a high-quality defense attorney or team. And you also saw the outcome. But the mystery remained, because the mystery of what happened to O.J. to the victims in this case, to Nicole Brown Simpson, to Ron Goldman. I just got off the phone with David Cook. David Cook has been the attorney for the Goldmans for years, and he is the one that has tried to collect the monies from the resulting civil verdict because he did not win in the civil court in California. And I think, as you have mentioned, they struggled for years, the Goldmans, to get any type of monetary damages that they were awarded. That was the justice they got, was civil court. And I spoke to David Cook minutes ago and asking him, what did you get? What did you ever get in the form of justice from that civil trial? Do you remember the book, If I Did It? That was a book that came out. Well, the Goldmans got the right to that book, and it became I Did It. And it was on the New York Times bestseller. And that's how the Goldmans got some of the civil judgment that they were due from that civil trial following the criminal trial in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I read that book, and it was sort of stunning that O.J. Simpson, after being acquitted, had written a book as if he had committed the murders, and that the way this family had to get some of the damages was to have it out there as if he had done it, that was a way that they could get some of the monetary damages that they were due. It was really kind of stunning and didn't seem like something that should happen. Let's talk with Diane Dimond. She is an investigative journalist. As we said, she was the first reporter at the scene of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman's murders. And I think, Diane, we're kind of all transported back to 1994 when we are here seeing that O.J. Simpson died. Take us back to 1994 and when you arrived there and what it was like.
Yeah, Brianna, that was the first thing I thought about when I heard about O.J. Simpson's passing today, was that murder scene. My cameraman and I rolled up on the Brentwood apartment of Nicole Brown Simpson just as they were loading the bodies into a morgue truck. And the morgue truck pulled away, and there we were, standing outside on the sidewalk, a long pathway going up to her front gate, and the pavers on the sidewalk were full of blood. There were paw prints from her dog, who had gotten loose after the murders and had gone down to the corner and started howling and alerted some neighbors. And we went inside the front gate, and I was stunned to see there was Nicole Brown Simpson's living room. It was all glass. The candles were still going on the hearth, up on the fireplace mantelpiece, and there was a big picture of O.J. and their two children. And it was so eerie to be standing there, literally in pools of blood. The police had gone. There was no police presence. There was some police tape, but we sort of ducked under that. And there I was standing where those two people had been murdered, and the candles were still burning on the mantelpiece. That's the first thing I thought of today when I heard about this news.
Wow, really insightful color of what those moments were like. Let's bring in Areva Martin. And Areva, one of the things that O.J.'s trial brought to light was the way in which questions about policing and the way that communities of color are policed were too often ignored, I think, by the country as a whole. And they were central to this case, and they were a huge part of why O.J. was acquitted.
Absolutely. We can't forget the testimony of Mark Furman, one of the detectives that was very involved in the collection of evidence and the investigation of Nicole Brown's death, as well as Ron Goldman. And Mark Furman perjured himself on the witness stand. He was asked a question under a withering cross-examination by Johnny Cochran about making former racist statements, using the N-word, and he lied about it. And there was evidence. He had done a recording with someone else, and they were able to bring that in and impeach him. And in fact, he had to plead no contest to perjury charges that were filed against him after the trial of O.J. Simpson ended. So we cannot underestimate the racist nature of policing in Los Angeles during the period of this O.J. Simpson trial. This is right after the 1992 civil unrest, where we watched in Los Angeles white police officers protect affluent neighborhoods while they allowed neighborhoods in Black and brown communities to burn, where we watched the police be engaged in all kinds of violent conduct against protesters. So that was the backdrop in which this trial was happening. And the racism of the LA Police Department was on full display in this trial. And there were gaping holes in the prosecutor's case, not just with Mark Furman's perjured testimony, but also with the collection and preservation of evidence. Johnny Cochran called it a contaminated cesspool, a cesspool of contamination. We just heard Diane say she walked up to the crime scene and she could have walked under the tape. That's how poorly this crime scene was maintained, was preserved, and yet they were forced to put on a case using the evidence from that contaminated crime scene and using these police officers, many of whom, like Mark Furman, had a horrific history and past with respect to the treatment and statements about African Americans.